It started with something small, a disagreement about vacation expenses. On that particular day, the atmosphere in the living room was thick with tension, the kind that clings to the air just before a storm. Usually, Michelle and I were like two perfectly in sync notes, our conversations flowing effortlessly, filled with laughter. But now, it felt as if we were pulling in opposite directions, each of us struggling to find common ground. The cause of the conflict was something I had been daydreaming about for weeks: a vacation. I was craving an escape, something luxurious, a chance for us to break free from our routine, to indulge a little. The idea of splurging seemed like the perfect way to ease the weight of our tight finances, a temporary relief from the stresses of daily life. Michelle, on the other hand, was the voice of reason, the realist in our relationship. She saw only the potential for financial ruin, clutching our bank statements as if they were shields against my desires. "David, we can't afford it," she said, her voice tight with concern. "We need to be responsible." Her words stung. Responsible? I shot back, my frustration bubbling to the surface. "We work so hard. We deserve something special just once. I'm getting a raise next year. With the promotion, we'll have the money for it." And then, in a moment of uncharacteristic honesty, Michelle's words, sharp and unguarded, cut through the air. "I wish you had a bigger. But we can't always get what we want, can we?" The silence that followed was suffocating. My face drained of color, and an icy numbness began to spread through me. I stood there, speechless, trying to comprehend the cruelty of her words. The shock and hurt were evident on my face, and it didn't take long for her to realize the weight of what she had just said. "Oh my God, David, I didn't mean that. I'm so sorry," she stammered, her voice trembling with panic. But the damage had already been done. Her frantic apologies, as desperate as they were, couldn't undo the hurt. I said nothing, turned, and walked away, the wound she had inflicted too deep to heal in that moment. The months that followed were a blur of awkward silences and half-hearted attempts at reconciliation. Michelle, racked with guilt, did everything she could to make amends. She brought home gifts, cooked my favorite meals, and even tried to reignite the spark between us. But each gesture, well-meaning as it was, only seemed to deepen the wound. Every touch, every whispered apology felt like salt on a raw, open wound. One night, as we lay in bed, she reached for me, hoping to bridge the distance between us. But I recoiled. "Get off," I muttered, my voice thick with bitterness. I never thought I would be the one to create such a chasm between us. As my birthday approached, I braced myself for yet another round of apologies. True to form, Michelle presented me with a gift and a heartfelt letter, but I couldn't bring myself to open either. The gesture felt hollow, meaningless in the wake of the damage she had caused. The space between us had grown into an insurmountable gulf, widening with each passing day. Michelle's desperation became more apparent as time went on. Her apologies grew more frantic, more urgent, but the damage was beyond repair. The words she had spoken had lingered in my mind, poisoning something fundamental to our relationship. Meanwhile, Michelle had begun to reflect on what had really been at the root of our conflict. The argument about the vacation, the financial strain, hadn't been about that at all. Those issues had simply been symptoms of something much larger, a growing unease within our marriage. She realized that the constant tension over money, the constant denial of any indulgence, had left her feeling suffocated. She had begun to resent the constant sacrifices, the never-ending sense of deprivation. And though David had only ever tried to be responsible, her frustration had festered. She found herself drawn into an emotional affair with a coworker named Mason. At first, it seemed innocent enough, a little harmless flirting. But soon, the attention he gave her began to fill the emptiness she felt inside. Mason made her feel seen and desired in a way she hadn't in a long time. She started convincing herself that her marriage was flawed to justify her connection with him. What had begun as innocent texts turned into late-night phone calls. The playful banter evolved into something far more intimate. Before long, Mason was sending her explicit messages and compliments, making her feel beautiful and desired in ways she hadn't in years. And then came the picture, the one that changed everything. It was a shallow thing, a ridiculous comparison, but in that moment, it planted a seed of discontent. Mason's image flaunting his endowment was a careless gesture, but it burrowed deep inside her. It made her compare him to David in ways she had never before. Though David had always been loving and attentive, in that moment, she began to wonder if she was missing out on something else. The seed of doubt grew, nurtured by Mason's constant attention and her own insecurities about their financial struggles. It festered into resentment, and that venomous bitterness found its way into the words she had spat in frustration. Her emotional affair had become a reflection of everything that was broken, everything she couldn't verbalize in her marriage. It wasn't just about the vacation. It wasn't just about the money. It was about something deeper, something they had both ignored for too long, something irreparable now. It all unraveled in that heated moment, when a small disagreement about the vacation expenses turned into a breaking point. David's insistence that we could afford it, his apparent disregard for my concerns about our financial strain, ignited something in me. A rush of anger and frustration bubbled up, fueled by secret comparisons I had been making in my mind. I lashed out, struck him where I knew it would hurt the most, and the second those words left my mouth, I knew I had made a terrible mistake. The look on David's face was unforgettable, the raw, unfiltered hurt in his eyes, the pain that hit me harder than any physical blow. It was like a fist to the gut, and shame washed over me, hot and suffocating. I had betrayed him, not just with the emotional affair, but with the careless cruelty of my words. In that moment, I realized how deeply I had failed him. The immediate aftermath of that confrontation was a whirlwind of regret. I severed all contact with Mason, blocked his number, deleted his messages, erased him completely from my life. What had once seemed exciting, even flattering, now felt cheap and tawdry. It was a stark reminder of my own weakness, insecurity, and how far I had gone astray. What had I been thinking? Seeking validation from a man who could only offer fleeting attention, while I jeopardized the love of the man who had committed his life to me. I tried to apologize to David, tried to explain that my hurtful words were simply a thoughtless, impulsive reaction, born from a place of frustration and fear. But even as I said it, the words felt empty, hollow. How could I take back something so cruel, so damaging? I made every effort to make amends. I bought him thoughtful gifts, cooked his favorite meals, tried to initiate intimacy, hoping to rekindle what we had once shared. But each attempt was met with coldness, with a wall of silence that seemed impenetrable. He flinched when I touched him. He turned away when I tried to kiss him. The gap between us widened with every passing day, and I was desperate to close it. I needed to show him just how deeply sorry I was, but I had no idea how. The words between us hung in the air, a toxic cloud that poisoned whatever love still lingered. My heart ached under the crushing weight of my mistake. The knowledge that I had irreparably damaged the most important relationship in my life was unbearable. I had let my own insecurities and resentment fester, and in doing so, I had transformed into someone I hardly recognized. Now, I was terrified of losing the man I loved because of my own failings. In my pain, I turned to old friends for comfort, Lucas and Charlotte, people who knew me before I met Michelle. I poured out my heart to them, the humiliation still raw, the guilt hanging heavy. Lucas, ever blunt, didn't sugarcoat his words. Even if you try to work this out, he said, you'll never forget those words. They'll always be there, lurking in the back of your mind. Charlotte, more thoughtful, offered a different perspective. I wonder if there's something else going on with Michelle. Maybe stress, or something she's not telling you. She paused before adding, you're young, David. You don't have kids. You could find someone better. Someone who wouldn't say something so cruel. Lucas jumped in again, his voice hard. Women's words are powerful, man. They can either lift you up or tear you down. Michelle chose to tear you down. If she really loved you, she wouldn't have lashed out like that. Charlotte nodded, her voice soft but firm. She just wanted to hurt you, David. That's not love. It's just spite. Their words hit me with painful clarity. I thanked them for their advice, even though it was hard to hear. But it was what I needed to hear. It gave me the clarity to see the truth. that it didn't matter anymore why Michelle had acted the way she had, whether it was stress, insecurity, or malice. The result was the same. The foundation of our relationship had been shattered, and my trust in us had eroded. I couldn't look at Michelle the same way. Couldn't live with the constant reminder of her words. The sting of her attack would linger forever. And so, I made the decision. I chose to divorce. Once the decision was made, it was surprisingly easy to follow through. Michelle was devastated, as expected. She begged. She pleaded. She promised to change. But my resolve was firm. I couldn't go back. She fought the divorce at first, but eventually, she resigned herself to what was inevitable. We divided our assets, and I moved out, leaving behind the remnants of a life we once shared. Some might think I overreacted. Some might believe that this was something trivial, that I should have let go, moved on. Maybe you think I should have laughed it off, brushed it aside, but I couldn't. That moment, her words, showed me just how she truly felt about me. It wasn't something I could forget or forgive. Moving on wasn't simple. The trauma of Michelle's words haunted me, a dark cloud over my confidence. It took time, and a lot of work, to rebuild the self-esteem she had so recklessly torn down. But deep down, I knew I had made the right decision. I deserved respect. I deserved love. And I deserved a partner who wouldn't weaponize my insecurities against me. The pain of the divorce was excruciating, a searing agony that tore at my soul. But it was also a necessary step toward healing. A step toward a future where my self-worth wouldn't be defined by the cruel words of a woman who once claimed to love me. The journey ahead would be difficult, but it was mine to walk. And for the first time in a long time, I was free to walk it alone.